Today we are going to continue our discussion of practice materials, looking more specifically at forms and at business type concepts. For those of you who haven't picked it up, I have your workshops from the last couple of classes. You won't find much of any comments there. I was really just going through to make sure that you understood some of the basic concepts in looking at regulation, source, authority, that kind of thing. Okay, so we looked a little bit at forms last time when we were looking at the practice materials sets like proof of facts and causes of action. But I wanted to focus on forms. And the reason I wanted to focus on forms is that, quite honestly, when I started practicing and graduated from law school, not having taken any research courses, and I was asked to draft something, and I hadn't a clue how to do it. And I also hadn't a clue that there are sets out there full of forms. So this was a revelation for me. So you all may know this already, since there are a lot of more practice-oriented courses today than there were back in the Stone Age when I was in law school. But hopefully I can show you some tips on how to use them, how to find them. The sources we're going to be looking at are going to change. In fact, you'll see some old, what used to be familiar sources that aren't so familiar. So change, as you already know, is a constant. So that's one reason why you might care about forms. The other is, I think, pretty straightforward, commonsensical. Why reinvent the wheel? Why do something when someone else has already done it and you can at least get a start on it, right? So the first thing you want to do when you're asked to draft something, and we're talking about anything, if you're asked to draft a complaint, you're asked to draft a lease agreement, you're asked to draft a stock purchase agreement, is to see if your organization already has one. Whether it's your supervisor asking you to do this or whatever department you're in, it doesn't matter what kind of organization. Most legal departments have a bank of what they call precedents. Sometimes they have, if you're in a very large organization, they might have a knowledge management system. Knowledge management is this whole area of endeavor where people like me, librarians, keep track of everything. It's far more sophisticated than what I'm saying. The point being is check to see if someone in your firm already did it, because then that's the way, or your organization, because that's the way they like to do it. And again, why reinvent the wheel? And I think if you ask if you have a knowledge management system, whoever you're asking will be very impressed that you know that might be a possibility. The other strategy I would say is for forms, and I find, and preparing for class today and looking for forms for whatever other reasons I might look for forms, it's still not as easy as I would like online. Google is great and getting better actually for forms. It used to be terrible and it's not terrible anymore. But sometimes, especially once again, when you're not finding what you're looking for, don't drive yourself nuts searching for hours and hours and hours. Print sometimes with the intelligent human prepared index might help you. So there are print sets out there, depending on whether you have access, of course. Always welcome back here. So print sets might be useful. So sometimes what I'll do is if I can't find what I'm looking for, I'll go to the print set, I'll actually find the form, and now that we're all becoming more familiar with publishers, if we know it's by Lexis, if we know it's by Westlaw, we can go online and maybe find the form online and download it and make our lives a whole lot easier rather than copying and retyping or whatever it is we have to do to transfer it. Okay, so that's sort of the why we care. I hope I've convinced you to care. How do we find them? Well, you all by now kind of know most of the answer. What are some of the places where we've seen references to forms? I already mentioned a couple. Yeah.
Westlaw homepage.
We're going to look at the Westlaw homepage. That's one place, but what have we seen already? I know it's just before spring break. I'm tired too. If all goes well. Anyway, so let's plow on through and see if we can. What's our best friend? Oh, good, you guys are good for that. Annotated codes. Annotated codes gives us those wonderful case notes or notes of decision, but they also give us references to secondary sources and to form books. So just since you all seem like you need a little bit of memory jog, let's take a look at what else. I just mentioned proof of fact, some of those practice materials that we talked about. Proof of fact, remember, had those interrogatories and form depositions. So here's one of our favorite sections, 1132. And again, this is also true looking at our BFF annotated code on Lexis, less so on Bloomberg. And let's take a look again at context and analysis and check this out. Forms. Now, this is going to be pretty generic, right? Because this is for all of section 1132. Where else? Where do we start our research? I heard secondary sources, right? Secondary sources will give us that explanation in the terminology, but secondary sources may be a treatise, maybe the loose leaves that we were looking at, because they're a particular type of secondary source. Again, good sources of forms, and probably better. As much as I love our BFF annotated code, it's going to be, these forms are going to be pretty general. Secondary source, particularly on a topic like that proof of facts article we keep on running across having to do with litigating against HMOs, they're going to be more specific. So they're going to be useful as well. Okay, so as Nick quite rightly pointed out, we can also just search for forms on Lexis, Westlaw, and Bloomberg. And sure enough, Westlaw has forms right here on the home page. We could, of course, run a search and narrow later on. But here's an example. Normally, I tend to do that out of habit. Here's an example where I would go to the forms link first. And the reason for that is Westlaw gives us a form finder. So it's more of a template. So you can narrow by state if that seems relevant, or you can narrow by topic, or you can just search. I'm going to narrow by state just because, again, depending on what you're looking for. So I'm going to look at something slightly different today than we've been talking about, and I'm going to look at a place where you may need to start no matter what your client's issue is, and that is having your client hire you. What's sometimes called an engagement letter. And we'll talk about that terminology in a moment. Now notice Westlaw, as it frequently does, asks us, are you looking for this? Engagement letters. And I might be awfully tempted to say, yes, I am. The problem if I say, yes, I am, you're never quite sure what you're going to get in Westlaw. And again, depending on your plan, you may or may not get charged, because that's a search. I get all these funky things. What these are actual examples from companies that have been filed in the, actually, I think they're SEC databases. We can see if we look at our breadcrumb trails from the Business Law Center. So the point of this is, as tempting as it is to click on whatever Westlaw suggests for us, you do so with foreknowledge that what may come up may look totally not useful. Okay, so instead I'll go to New York and I will type in and actually search in what I chose, New York Form Finder, rather than Westlaw's. And yes, I could narrow further by topic if I wanted to as well, obviously. And once again, I hope this is a theme, well, this is what I hope, it is a major theme of the course, bibliographic awareness, right? Be aware of context, whether you're looking at the statutory scheme to see what section, what headings your section falls under. Let's see what type of set my form is under. So this is forms for small business entities. So if I am thinking about representing a small business entity, that would be good. Closely held corporations, again, so slightly different. American Juris Legal Form, so that's a little bit more general. Sometimes you'll get very specific, like topic areas. So we're going to see examples where it's family law, which is fine if your matter is a family law matter, but you don't want to pull up a form for family law if you're representing a small business that's forming. So let's just see what the form looks like. And I can download this into Word and then mark it up as I want. It just looks like a form, right? And what we'll notice here is it's in Chapter 29, Retainer Agreement. So if for whatever reason we were asked, go find an engagement letter, we might notice retainer agreements. What's a retainer agreement? So again, keeping that terminology in mind. It turns out that the state, they're used somewhat interchangeably. I honestly am not sure if they're exactly the same thing, but I know that sometimes you find it under retainer agreements and sometimes you find it under engagement letters. So again, bibliographic awareness, get the sense of the context, take a look at our table of contents. And this is one of those tips, those tools that we found in just about every resource we've looked at, but again, especially true for forms, because finding forms online, if you don't have the exact terminology, or like me, I'm not exactly sure the difference between engagement letter and retainer agreement, so I kind of want to see what's in there. So we can actually see we have different varieties or flavors of engagement letters or retainer agreements. So if I'm interested in a flat fee versus a percentage fee, if there's entertainment law services, waiver of conflict, so all different aspects of this concept of engagement letter or retainer agreement that I might not have even thought about including. It's like, well, actually, I do need to decide on my fee, right? Because I do want to get paid. And do I have to worry about a waiver of conflict? Just even if I think, okay, no, that's good that I've given that affirmative thought. Again, the other advantage table of contents is you might run into something else. Oh, look, checklists. So maybe I want to look at that and make sure I've got everything that I need, especially if I haven't done too many of these. Okay. You might also notice back in our list a doc and form builder with this funky little icon there. And notice it's asking us to go somewhere different, preview and build the form letter to client indicating decision. So sure, let's continue. What this is doing is bringing us into a new segment that Westlaw is now offering. Has just started to offer to law schools, I'm guessing also is offering to commercial clients, and they call it their Practice Ready package. So let's go back here a moment to, if you'll notice, this is the sign-in page. Mine's going to look a little bit different than yours. You won't say faculty, but it'll have something in there. And what you will notice when you first sign on to Westlaw, before you even choose Westlaw or TWEN, you will see down here, you should see down here, Practice Ready package. And this is a new offering, like I said, for Westlaw. I don't even know that every law school has signed up with it quite yet. We got in early because we thought it was a good thing. And it's a combination of a suite of services that Westlaw is offering to help, basically, people work through actual practical, attorneys, to work through actual practical problems, rather than, as we've been going through the course, we've been segmenting types of resources. This is okay, I have a legal problem. What do I do now? So you can see some of the different parts. So there's research parts, and we'll be taking a look at practical law and practice point when we talk about business resources. Because Westlaw is recognizing you go into the practice of law, you may be representing businesses, right? It probably is good to know a little bit about those businesses. There's also these drafting tools. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at Westlaw Doc and Form Builder. There's also this drafting essential that helps you with other types of documents. And we're not going to spend a whole lot. I mean, I could spend a good 2-3 classes on just this stuff. 2 classes. Obviously, we're not going to do that. We don't have time, and I'm not entirely sure how many of you, even if you are in a Westlaw shop, will have access to these. So I'll give you a basic introduction of what it might look like and why you might be interested, and then you can investigate. One of the things we'll be talking about today in a variety of the resources is how do you learn this new stuff? Like I said, we just don't have time to go through this. Probably the best way these days, you already know, and that's YouTube. You can YouTube Lexis Westlaw. Another way, a little more direct, is on usually the landing page, the home page, you'll find something about help or training. What Westlaw has, you can look at the training tool. What Westlaw also has for practice ready is in TWEN, I think you all should see the practice ready implementation resources. If you don't see it in TWEN, then you'll probably see it something close to, if not the same thing, in training tools. And these days, with these web-based training, you can see the screenshots, they walk you through it. We actually did something similar when we did the Lexis Learn. And actually, if we have time today, we'll look at another one of those. So technique on how to learn a new system, a new interface. Obviously another, and it depends on your learning style too, and others, just to use it. Now you want to be careful with that if you're in a fee environment. If I'm learning Westlaw, I want to know what I'm getting charged for. Am I getting charged for every search I do? Am I getting charged by time? Am I in a different kind of environment where if I play around with this, it's okay? Forms are one of those areas like treatises that may cost a whole lot of money. So this document form builder, if you even have it available, may cost a whole lot of money, may not be extra at all. I don't know how the pricing works for this. So once again, find the appropriate person, librarian, managing partner, office manager, whomever, and ask. So here's what the doc and form builder likes, and it again is more of a step-by-step approach to walk you through. And at some point, it didn't pop up for me now, but it did before. When I clicked on doc and form builder, a little video popped up, so I didn't have to go to help to find the video. I had a little video walk me through. So that's a little bit about doc and form builder. There's the video. If I just click on the doc and form builder by itself without having gone through a search, here's the little video that pops up. It's kind of useful. I watched it earlier. Mariella, I think I'm a little bit by you. Those sort of canned videos I space out pretty quickly. Yeah. So that's why I like to just, if I can, without getting too much money, costing too much money, I just like to dive in. What I like to do is I like to play around with it using something that I'm a little bit familiar with. So if we're talking about engagement letters, now we're not very familiar with it yet, but we have a sense. I might want to see how that might work. So I might want to go to New York and see now it looks a little bit different than the form, just the forms template. So I would have to, I could search, or I could guess it's an attorney-client matter. And so take a list, and there's a form list, or see what's here, and just see what kind of information I'm getting here. And maybe a new client letter sounds close. And so it's giving me a little bit more information than just the form. So again, this is designed to help walk you through if it's something that you haven't done before or haven't done very much. So it could be quite useful. Okay, the other technique I use, because again, sometimes finding the form I need can be difficult. I'm just resuming back into Westlaw. And that is, again, we'll just start over. And back here in forms, and again, depending on how I want to narrow, I might just go to a particular publication now, since you haven't, I'm guessing you haven't used too many of these yet, you're not that familiar yet, but at the very least you can guess. So this is driving while intoxicated, so if my case isn't about that, I don't want to be searching that. So maybe I want to go with something, or maybe I am interested in discovery or I'm not. Or maybe I want more general. If I'm representing a small business, then New York Forms Legal and Business. Because a lot of times what you'll find is you'll do a search and you'll get a whole long list and they'll all be like all over the place. So this is a way to narrow if that happens. West McKinney's forms. So McKinney's our BFF's New York BFF statutory code. It's got a set of forms that coordinates with the statutes. So if there's a form if the statute says there should be a form, McKinney's forms might have it. So you can choose a particular set or at least narrow down your results to a particular set. Any questions? Let's take a look at Lexis. So Lexis here, I already narrowed to New York and forms. Lexis had it so you can see forms, and obviously you can narrow to New York. So Lexis pretty much just gives you everything. So here's engagement letter for estate planning, and joint spousal, and concurrent spousal, and multiple generations of same family. So as I mentioned, if you're interested, if your matter, you're representing someone in a family law matter, this is great. But if you're not, this is not very useful. So on Lexis, the way to get around that is similar, a similar strategy of narrowing the particular set, but what you can do is also narrow by form type. So we don't really see our form type here with respect to engagement letter. Let's see if it's got, so if we wanted a letter or agreement. So what I might do is, they've got a lot of types here. I might select multiple and narrow by letter or agreement. But again, what I might also do is narrow by particular source. And I might select multiple or just do one. So I could do, forms for the civil practice. Not sure if this is going to be a litigation issue. Maybe not pleading. That doesn't make sense. Consolidated laws. Whoops, I went too fast there, sorry, but what's nice is I can pick a particular title. I'm not sure why California's in there. There's a title with California, and we narrowed to New York, but that happens. So you can see there's probate and estate. So by not choosing that, hopefully I get rid of some of those. It should be a business practice. I think it's a little way down here. There we go, business and commercial. So hopefully I get rid of at least some of the family, and sure enough, retainer agreement, business and commercial. And it's not that I needed to know that particular set, I just needed to read the titles and say, okay, it's not family, it's not estate, business, that's what I want. And again, you can download it into Word and then start adapting and filling it out with your client's particular information and whatever else it is that you want to add. And once again, always useful to look at the table of contents. Again, counsel information checklist, so could be some other useful materials, other forms that might be a little bit more suited to what it is you need. Again, it depends on your particular need. Okay, any questions on Lexis? Let's take a look at Bloomberg then. Bloomberg actually is because it's a business-oriented company from its news tends to have more business-oriented forms. So, look familiar? Oh, good. I see some furrowed brows wondering, what the heck is that? That's Bloomberg. Bloomberg changed yesterday. Yeah. So if I meant to ask you earlier if anyone was working on their assignment and noticed anything about Bloomberg, but that's okay. So that's what you're going to see for Bloomberg. The old Bloomberg is gone. No more. See ya. So we're all going to have to get used to it. Now, maybe, I have seen in your assignments, a lot of you mentioned Bloomberg's really not my favorite, and I'm understating that a little bit. So maybe this is an improvement. I hope so. Honestly, I've been looking at it for a day and a half now, so I don't have an opinion yet. So we shall investigate together. So as I mentioned, one way I like to investigate news sources, and we'll look at forms in a moment, but one way I like to investigate news sources is to I learn better by seeing and doing. So I'm going to put in a search I know and love, ERISA preemption, and let's see what it did. Oh, it searched it for me. Okay, good. And again, it looks a little different, but it got kind of the same structure. I've got the filters on the side, although they've reordered the filters on me, and we see they put court opinions on top. It's like, all right, so this kind of works the same, looks a little different. I can narrow by my content type. Kind of interesting filter by practice areas. That might try that out for researching our client's issue. Interesting, it separates out books and treatises and portfolios. Ooh, I like that. We talked a little bit about portfolios. Again, Bloomberg owns BNA, and we looked at BNA in the beginning of the semester and a little bit. So these portfolios are these little booklets that just narrow in on a particular topic, and if you find them, they're really useful. So I could look and see. There's one here. They tend to. They're really useful for tax practitioners. I know tax practitioners love them a lot. So here they're law reports. So this is kind of interesting. The other thing I read, because Bloomberg sent out an email, and I honestly haven't played with this yet, is that Bloomberg now has more of a natural language capability. So that's still a big question mark as to how well that works. I'm kind of interested to see here. That's why I like to use a known search. I just threw in the words ERISA preemption, and I want to look at this statutes, so codified statutes. So I would be curious to see if I narrowed. I don't see either of our federal statutes surfacing, although I'm searching everything, all states. So, but even if we narrowed, where's jurisdiction? Oh, so this is interesting. Narrow by content type, narrow by date. So let's see if we narrow first by content type and then jurisdiction. Again, this is why we explore. There we go, there's jurisdiction. Not that many though, it's kind of interesting too. So we can just look, and let's narrow by federal. Okay, so we don't get any of the sections that we know. Interesting. I'm going to have to play around with that and see how well their natural language works. Yeah?
It's more of a concern question because it's new. Everything, I'm assuming, transfers over. But will there be, like, I don't know if you know, will there be some restrictions to Bloomberg now? Like, we're not finding things we should be finding, or just keep playing with it?
I think all of the content that we used before will still be there. And my understanding is that everything that's available on Bloomberg Law is available to us in the law school world. So whatever was available to us last week should be available to us this week.
It might have been like why we weren't finding searches that was happening. I don't know if that is.
You mean why we weren't finding sections?
Yeah, that was
I honestly don't know the answer to that yet. We didn't do particularly well in the old Bloomberg with this kind of search either, because there was no natural language. We would have wanted to use our connectors, which I'm pretty sure we can still use. And the other thing I didn't do is truncate. Should have selected sources there. I think I have a typo in there. But maybe because I did /p. Remember, the word preemption actually isn't in section 1144. The title's other laws, and the only place we find preemption is in the notice of decisions, at least on Lexis and Westlaw. So that may be, so this might not have pulled up anything on Bloomberg of the old days either. So that's what I mean about taking a known quantity, something that you know, understand how it would work, at least on the other systems. So far, my natural language conclusion is that I can't really tell how well it works. Maybe I want to try, let's see. It's not the best search in the world, honestly. Since we already know that the title of section 1144 is other laws. But that's pretty handy search. So you play around. And the nice thing, at least about Bloomberg, wherever you are, if you have Bloomberg available, is you don't have to worry about cost. It's a flat fee. Okay, so the other thing about learning a new system is just sort of learning how it navigates. As I mentioned, one other way to learn a system, again, depending on your learning style, is to find the help. And you can try here on the home page. You can either try help, Control F for help, or just scroll through and you find it here at the bottom, and you might take a look at getting started or browse all help topics. And not surprisingly, since this is a very significant change, they're going to have some videos for us, so help you with navigation. Or again, you can click around like I tend to do, whatever basically is your preferred learning style. So I'm going to click on Browse and see what I find there. And since we're interested in forms, and I might be interested in more transactional forms, see what they have there. And again, a precedent search, this is one place where you would find forms on Bloomberg. Again, forms are sometimes referred to as precedents. A lot of time that term will be used actually in organizations. Check out practical guidance. I always like practical guidance. I could use as much practical guidance as I can get, goodness knows. And we see, so there is this trend that we're seeing. We saw it with the new practice-ready materials on Westlaw. We see this step-by-step guidance on Bloomberg. We'll actually be looking at something called Practice Advisor on Lexis in a little while. So Bloomberg gives us step-by-step guidance, and since I chose corporate transactional, it's going to be very specific to that area. And we see again links here for those precedent documents and clauses. So I could either search, and again, I just investigate. So I'm going to scroll down just because it might be something of slightly more interest to everybody here, or not everybody, but some of you had mentioned you're interested in real estate. So let's take a look at leases, since many of us have had to sign one at some point. And I could add additional search terms to leases, or I could just search for all leases as I've done here, and again, you'll see Well, the only other thing I noticed of interest is if I click here on Bloomberg Law, which is my tendency to, I click on the title to go back to the home page. Notice here they have a box just for us, law school success, so I might want to investigate litigation and transactional resources, and if all goes according to plan, I have a couple of tabs open to that effect. Yeah, so there's transactional resources. I can see what they have there, and again, this is more of that drafting. So we have descriptions, we have guidance by practice area, litigation. Is that litigation? No, that's not our litigation, so we can just click on litigation. So I like to have tabs. Litigation organized a little bit differently. I'm not sure how, if I were a litigator, if I would find this useful or not. So as I started to say, clicking on Bloomberg Law will bring me to this sort of law school homepage. We see our name right here. If I go to Browse and go to Home, it brings me to more of a navigation homepage. And I might have learned that if I watched one of those videos in the help section. But I figured that one out. So any other questions about Bloomberg? Not sure I can answer them since I haven't seen it for very long, but I could give it a try. Okay, so as I mentioned, we don't go there. Let's go to, actually, I don't do that Google quite yet. So as I mentioned, Google isn't great for forms. Again, depending if you don't have the name of a form, so if you don't know it's called engagement letter or retainer agreement, it's going to be pretty hard to find. But Google is getting better, I have found, if you do. So engagement letter New York. So you can see it gives you some prompts. And it gives you a sample engagement letter. Now, once again, once you're Googling, you want to think about the source. Lexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg. You can, well, these are attorneys who know what they're doing, where they've gotten these forms or samples if it's from another organization. Google, who knows? It could be Lisa's Bar and Grill and website that, hey, I'm going to have some fun. How that's fun, I don't know, but I'm going to have some fun and post a letter that I just invented, even though I don't know what I'm doing. But the New York Bar Association, I'm going to assume they pretty much know what they're doing. So it gives you some background. Actually, new court rule requires lawyers to provide letters of engagement to clients. I did not know that. Those of you who are going to practice in New York, it's probably good that you now do. And you will see that there is a sample letter here, sample letter of engagement. We go back. We have more explanatory page here, talking about best practices in legal management. So as I said, Google didn't used to be so good, but they are definitely getting better. I was actually a little bit surprised because sometimes what I will do as an example is look for a complaint. Sometimes finding a complaint, as basic a form as that is, it sometimes can be really difficult just to find a plain vanilla complaint. But if I say complaint New York, see, as I phrased it here, it's actually not quite as easy because now they're thinking about complaints about attorneys. But that's, let me see if I get the phrasing. Breach of contract, slightly more specific. Someone's in complaint for fraud, breach of contract. Now, that's a law firm. Who knows how good it is? Example only from the New York Unified Court. That might be a little bit more reliable since it's being put out there by the court, although I might look at the law firm one just for ideas for language. That's another thing about drafting. I don't know if you've taken drafting courses, but imagine if you had talked about looking at a whole bunch of different forms and pulling out the bits from each one that best applies to your client, because you're never going to find one form that solves your client's exact needs, right? Because they're all different. So again, Google isn't bad, but once my standard Google rule applies, give it a try. If you find something good, great. Don't stop there, and certainly don't spend forever thinking, I've got to find something on Google, because you might just not have. Again, it took me a couple of tries to pull up the New York complaint if you don't think of the right terms, or maybe it's just not there. Okay. So let's stop here and talk a little bit about business and business resources. Again, even if you wind up practicing in an area like family law, you might have a family that owns a business, and that may be involved in whatever transactions or litigation comes up, and certainly may be representing or litigating for or against various businesses, or even working for a business. So there's some concepts that are good to just understand overall, and a couple of research tools that can help with that. So does everybody know the difference between a public company and a private company? Public essentially, not only it offers its stock on publicly traded exchanges. You can have a private company that issues stock privately, and that distinction is important because if it's a public company, it's going to come under the jurisdiction of the SEC, so you can learn a lot about that company from SEC filings. If it's a private company, it's going to be more difficult to find, but even knowing that it's a private company will direct you toward resources for private companies. In fact, Bloomberg would be one of those resources you would check, certainly for public companies, and they also have some decent information for private companies. And of course, the difference between equity, which are basically shares, and debt, which are basically bonds. One research piece of information, and I noticed this when we were going through Bloomberg and looking at some of the business information, are codes that are signed by the government, basically for census purposes. And these codes are actually used by resources like Bloomberg. There are other business databases. If you wind up working for a corporation rather than for a legal organization, you might find they have access to Bloomberg, the Bloomberg Terminal. Merchant is another database that we actually have here at Hofstra S&P. These are all business. You're in the business school, you would be using these databases to use your research. And one of the pieces of information that you would use would be either what's called a NAICS code or an SIC code. And I'm at just the website, www.naics.com, and I wrote down what they stand for so I get it accurately. NAICS is North American Industry Classification System, and the SIC is Standard Industrial Classification. The difference is the SIC was used first. I think it was established maybe 40 or 50 years ago. Don't quote me on the years. And then they determined that that wasn't sophisticated enough, so they switched over to the NAICS system. But a lot of resources still use the SIC, so it's good to understand both. So what on earth am I talking about? Classification system. So I'm here, as you can see at the site. You can do a keyword search, or you can just look at the list. And so basically the different industries are assigned, the sort of overall areas are assigned numbers. And you could do a search if you're searching for a particular industry or type of profession. I happen to know that professional might be of interest. So professional is number 54, and then within number 54 are these subdivisions, and sure enough, it's of interest. We have offices of lawyers. And if we go further in, so the next code is 541110, so if you wanted to do research in any of these databases I was mentioning, it would be awfully useful to know that code. And they get updated periodically, as you can see, although they haven't changed much for the legal biz. So the NAICS is the more recent, as I mentioned, and the SIC is a little bit older, and as you'll observe, it's a little bit simpler. I think lawyers actually didn't search for this, but I think lawyers come under services. Legal services, yeah? So the numbering system, while shorter and simpler, is less specific. Okay, so those are just some business concepts to keep in mind. So if you need to find out about a company, first place we're all going to go, of course, is Google. And I figured, if we're going to Google, let's Google and see what we can learn about them. So I Googled Google annual report. An annual report, companies that are publicly traded are required to submit an annual report to the SEC, and probably also to the investors, every year. And so I Googled annual report for last year, and Google is smart enough to know that it now comes under the overall company alphabet. We heard that in the news a year or two ago. Google spun off a bunch of companies, so the Google search stayed the same, and then there are these other companies, and they all come under the main company heading alphabet. And these numbers are basically the SEC form numbers. So it's useful to know that an annual report is actually called a 10K. And in fact, if you get into securities, you and your fellow attorney colleagues will be referring to the SEC form numbers by their numbers. You won't call it an annual report. You'll call it, oh, their 10K got filed. So here you can see what a 10K for Alphabet looks like, and it has a ton of information about the company, how they performed, lots of fairly technical information, technical accounting information. So business risk factors, staff properties, legal proceedings. I always thought if you are interviewing with a company to become their counsel, to work in their counsel's office, I would highly recommend taking a look at the 10K annual report and maybe some of these other documents that you might find, so you can learn about the company and go to the interview prepared to ask some informed questions. You can learn about executive compensation, which actually I just learned in checking this out is listed in a different SEC filing, a proxy statement. But you can learn a lot of stuff in these SEC filings. And again, just by Googling company name and annual report, you get a start. So again, we're talking about public companies here that file with the SEC. You can actually look at those filings in the SEC database called EDGAR, E-D-G-A-R. Again, just Google SEC and EDGAR, and you come up with this. So you can look, as I said, you can look at the filings from the various companies. There are all of these business databases I mentioned earlier, Merchants, Standard & Poor's, Hoovers is another. They will give you access to these SEC filings and give you fancy search mechanisms to help you find these a little bit more easily than you would off of the free website. Bloomberg, another one that would give you access to the SEC filings. One nice thing about Edgar is they give you, because it's available to the public, give you a little more explanation than some of these business databases might. So if you are more of a beginner in the business world, as I really am, this is pretty useful. So in the company filings search link over here, it gives you you have a link here to how to research public companies. So I, for one, would find that very useful because, as I said, I'm not an expert in business research, so I would get started there. And again, as we've been talking about how to learn how to navigate new interfaces like Bloomberg or totally new offerings like we saw on Westlaw with the Practice Ready. And the nice thing in the web is you don't have to worry about cost. Just click around and choose an example. Like I said, I prefer to just try and search rather than watching tutorials. But I actually would read this just to get started to understand what I was looking at. Okay, other sources of business type information, and that's basically, some people refer to it as fact research, just finding facts, and of course these days on the web, definitely Google, but for more statistical oriented approach. And again, you're going to find these statistics useful when making legal arguments about valuing companies, about valuing degree, or say valuing academic degrees, say if you were representing one party in a divorce. So Bureau of Labor Statistics is a source for that, as well as the Census Bureau. And these are actually really sophisticated statistical databases that probably will take a little bit of learning to use. But again, YouTube and the site itself are going to be good sources to help you with that. My goal here, obviously, is not to teach you how to use these, because they're probably each a class in and of themselves, and obviously not really our focus in an advanced legal research class, but I wanted to highlight their existence. This stuff is out there, and it's on the web, and can be extraordinarily useful. So I mentioned Bloomberg in its new iteration. Bloomberg is particularly useful for, as I said, company research. And it has this Business Intelligence Center. So again, if you're interested in researching a company, and it may be public or private, obviously far more information is available publicly because of these SEC filings, but you can do a lot of interesting research here. One of the kind of neat features, again, if you're representing a company, thinking about representing a company, litigating for or against a company, this company report writer is kind of cool. This all comes under the heading competitive intelligence these days, if you actually want to look up. There we go. So what you'll see here actually is you can create a report, and it's a very fancy looking report. I actually created a template a couple of years ago to look at a report for Google, so I could go back and recreate that report. In fact, that's what I did a little while ago in one of these tabs here, if I could hopefully find it. There it is. So I recreated this actually yesterday, so you can see what a company report. I didn't want to do it here because it takes a couple of minutes for it to generate and download. So again, this is slightly more targeted than what would be in the annual report. You can pick and choose what goes in here. That's what that template's all about. So basically litigation, company management, board of directors. Yeah, it didn't pull up the executive compensation. Too bad. So again, if you have access to Bloomberg, Bloomberg is particularly powerful for business information, not surprisingly. Another source we didn't look at quite yet, but available at what we saw earlier from Westlaw. Remember I mentioned there's that whole new Practice Ready package. And in that Practice Ready package, in addition to the document drafting, is a source called Practical Law. Practical Law was an independent company that got bought out by Westlaw's parent, Thomson Reuters, and Practical Law was what it sounded like. It was tools to help attorneys with actually representing clients more on the transactional side. So you can see practice notes, standard documents. And so what Westlaw did is it combined, when it bought Practical Law, it combined Practical Law with what already is available in terms of statutes and cases and all the materials we've been investigating on Westlaw, and combined it into a product called Practice Point. So again, another tool like we saw here's Practice Point. A Practice Point, like that document builder, requires a separate login. So just because you have access to Westlaw doesn't necessarily mean you have access to Practice Point. We do here for now. So I will show you a really quick demo of what Practice Point might look at. So again, some of you mentioned you were interested in real estate in our first class. So if we were interested in real estate and we were interested, say, in residential real estate, let's scroll down so we can see what's available. So I could see what might be involved as an attorney in leasing real estate. So drafting a lease or termination and eviction. And so it gives us a filters here on the side, a list of I can browse by task or I can browse by document type. And here we see links to forms. So again, very practical oriented. And then again, here is where it pulls in some of the materials on Westlaw in terms of secondary sources. And you can see some of those materials here. Let's just take a quick look just to see what. So here are our tasks that are available. So these are all the tasks of which drafting a lease is the one that we're looking at. But it's kind of actually interesting just to see leasing commercial real estate, what the different steps might be. Learn a little bit about real estate law just looking at these steps. So owning, types of real estate, purchasing and selling, understanding. So again, if you have this available, and again, depending on the cost and pricing for your organization, could be really useful, especially as new attorneys where you are somewhat less experienced by clinicians as an attorney. Okay, so that is Westlaw Practice Point. And as I promised, the equivalent, it's kind of interesting to me as I do this for a living, to see what gets offered and how the offerings evolve and how the competition happens. So we saw a little bit on Bloomberg in terms of their practice guidance. We've now seen the Doc Builder and Practice Point on Westlaw. On Lexis, we now have Practice Advisor. So I think what's happened is over time these databases have focused on litigators because litigators need to do a lot of research, right? They need to find cases, they need to find statutes, and the transactional attorney said, but what about us? So I think that is now being answered by some of these resources. So we can see again, Practice Advisor works by practice areas, so just compare and contrast. Go by real estate. And let's see if we can find, so there's office leasing, retail leasing, subleasing. Oh, there's residential transactions. So just as by way of compare and contrast. You can see an apartment lease or a house lease. So there are the forms and there are practice notes. So in addition to just the forms, there are advice from attorneys that Lexis has vetted essentially, so you can rely on them, unlike whatever random advice you might find on Google at some random law firm that's trying to basically get clients. So I would think these practice notes could be very useful. And then we see some of the types of materials that we've been talking about all semester. So what I thought we would do, and we don't have to do the whole thing, is go through. We saw the Lexis Learn when we did the makeup for the snow day. So if you all on your laptops would go to Lexis, and actually I may be logged out. Let's see. Yeah, I'm logged out. I'm going to show you what it looks like from a student standpoint. It logged me out. So once logged into the Lexis home page, if you go to Lexis Learn, you'll get to the My Classes, and you should see actually two. If you go to the self-guided, this actually allows you, and this is worth knowing about. Are you getting there? Or are you all looking? No. Really? This is why I signed in as in my student account. So all you see is the shepherds? All right, so let's, if we add a class. Yeah, if you go to add a class, maybe that's what I did. And then do you see self-guided? Okay, so click on self-guided. And now do you see?
Oh, so.
Yeah.
So what you've now done is you've added yourself so you can see all of the modules. So if you're interested in going back. So once you click on self-guided, you should see all of these modules. Are you with me? So now the other thing I'm going to ask you to do is to turn off your volume, because if we all have volume playing, we'll be slightly off and it'll be cacophony. So I'm going to plug in the sound here so you can hear from mine and turn up my volume. Are we all good? So we're going to look at drafting documents for transactional practice, Module 10. And we'll walk through this together, but you can follow along and do the questions. So you're all there? All good? Module 10. Okay, that works. So we get all the 90s.
Throughout this module, questions will surface, giving you the chance to review the information covered. Use the legal research system below the video player to locate the answers. In this module, you'll learn the basics of drafting documents in transactional practice areas. Have you ever thought about what you would do if you were asked to draft a stock purchase agreement, a commitment letter, an employment contract, a trademark license, a letter of intent, or a registration statement? You may not know what some of these documents are, but at some point in your legal career, you might be asked to draft one. Transactional drafting gets easier as you build your practice. You'll develop a bank of forms, understand the nuances of specific clauses, and learn questions to ask before you start drafting. Until then, you'll want to do what most new attorneys do. Use practice notes, treatises, and forms to help draft
See,
whatever
I'm not making it
documents
up.
you're asked to work
She
on.
said it too. Okay, so let's do this as a group. What resource will be helpful when starting drafting an assignment? Practice note, treatise, forms, all of the above. All of the above. Yay. We got it right. Practice notes used by most attorneys when drafting assignment.
You are interning for the law firm of Tai, Loy & Ho
I
in
don't know why they give a
Honolulu,
name, but
Hawaii.
anyway.
Your supervising attorney asks you to draft an industrial
Hawaii.
lease for a warehouse. The warehouse is adjacent to the tropical food company plantation and will be used as a fulfillment center for an online retailer. The lessee, Mr. R.W. Bonds, plans to distribute pineapple-themed merchandise from the warehouse.
Sounds fun.
Because of the uncertain nature of this business, he may want to terminate the lease prior to the end of the term. He has requested the lease include a form of surrender agreement as an exhibit. You've never drafted an industrial lease before and have never heard of a surrender agreement. So you need some practical guidance before you start writing. You access a practical guidance tool. Then select Real Estate from the Practice Areas menu.
So looking at the menu, what practice area is not available? If you're following along on your computer. Ew, it's not giving me Lexis, so you're all on your own here. Are you all good with family? Good luck getting home. Hey, well done. Do you all see Lexis below yours? Because when I did this earlier, it worked fine, of course. Technology being what it is.
There's a subtopic for industrial lease agreements under industrial leasing on the left. Now you have a collection of resources dedicated to the topic, starting with an overview. The overview outlines the process of creating an industrial lease, the important provisions of an industrial lease, and how an industrial lease is negotiated and executed.
So can you all get to this overview? Try. There. That's hard. So I don't mess that up. Firefox. Are you getting there? On your laptops. So, where is it? Real estate. Industrials. So are you here? Are you seeing the overview? You are seeing the overview. Okay, so do we have an answer? Typically, which party drafts the industrial lease agreement? The attorney? Landlord's attorney, we good with landlord's attorney? It's just common sense. That's why these can be useful, but I kind of lose focus occasionally. But let's see if we can, it'll show us some features that are actually worth seeing.
Now that you have a general understanding of industrial lease agreements,
Hey,
you'll
we're
want to go
experts.
deeper to determine what are permissible uses for the property and what remedies you can include in the agreement in case of a default. The best place to start for specific questions about an agreement or other document is the practice notes, located in the content areas
This
on
is
the left.
what's really useful.
You'll get the guidance you need to draft and negotiate key provisions of an industrial lease agreement from expert attorneys who practice in this area of law. As you scroll through the practice notes, you'll see a variety of issues related to industrial lease agreements. There's a practice note covering permitted uses that explains what the provision is and what it should say, depending on which side of the transaction you're representing.
So, what is important consideration for permitted uses, provision of industrial lease agreement? So, practice notes. So, I think I'm seeing something different than you all. So, you look at your laptops and anybody find an important consideration for permitted uses provision? Pardon? Tenant's ability to operate its business. Everybody good with B? So wait, what, you're just clicking each one and seeing which one is correct?
No. The second line says that.
Yeah. What's that?
No one's had any faith.
You'll also want to check for practice notes regarding remedies.
So is this interesting, useful,
This topic
or
discusses
do
the
we want to
provisions
move
that
on?
should be negotiated for default and remedies. It covers what to consider when drafting and negotiating these provisions.
Question here, tenant self-help rights. Tenant's ability to perform necessary required maintenance, ability to improve property. Default and remedies. I'm looking at something different here. So what do we think? A. We have confidence. A. Ability to perform necessary required maintenance if the landlord fails to do so. See, we had faith. Does everybody follow me? More important. Someone-
Can you just borrow your podium, that portable thing?
Yeah, help yourself.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. So the point being, of course, these practice notes can be quite useful. So let's continue. We only have a couple minutes left.
You've reviewed the practice notes, but want to see what an industrial lease agreement really looks like before you start drafting. Select the Forms category and you'll have a variety to choose from. The Commercial and Industrial Lease Agreement seems like a good place to start. You're now looking at a standard industrial lease agreement. As you scroll through the form, you'll notice several open fields. These fields allow you to insert your own information. There are also additional tools to the right of the form, including drafting notes.
Yeah.
These notes are written by attorney experts and will help you better understand the nuances of the drafting process for the clauses you may need to include in the agreement you're drafting. Once you've completed the form, you can print or download it using the delivery menu above it.
Can you see what other forms are available? I don't know how critical that is. Anybody? Makes sense. Guys are good. Again, those drafting notes being the main point.
Don't forget, you've also been asked to draft a surrender agreement as an exhibit to the lease. There's a topic entitled Surrender of Lease listed to the left. Expanding that topic provides a link to resources for surrender agreements. You'll see a similar list of resources. This practice note, written by an attorney expert who practices real estate law, contains a variety of topics to help you draft and negotiate this type of an agreement. The section titled Importance of Releases provides excellent background information covering why you want to include a surrender agreement with a lease.
So anybody? Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yep. Okay, we'll finish this up
After reviewing the practice notes, use the Forms tab to access sample surrender agreements. Then you can fill in the open fields of the form and download it to your computer.
Sounds so exciting. Excited, rather. Okay. Okay, this one we don't need to stop for.
When you're new to transactional drafting, the best way to learn the ins and outs is to get help from other attorneys who practice in this area.
Okay, we're going to stop there. Just wanted to give you a sense of what these are like. I mean, you saw the other modules, and also give you a sense of practical Lexis Practice Advisor and some of those features. I mean, I think those the practice notes, the drafting notes, could be really useful, especially in their hypothetical. If you're drafting this lease and haven't done anything like that before. Any questions? Okay, so we talked a little bit about business information on the web, and we talked a little bit about general fact information on the web. We will finish up today talking a little bit about public records. Have any of you ever had to do anything like a UCC search or a filings, judgments, and liens search? Again, back while the earth was still cooling and I was practicing, I did some of that. Actually, you contract out to companies that do this for a living. This was before the web, so I don't know quite how it's done now because I was practicing while the earth was still cooling. So it may be that that either there's just a for-fee website that you can go to, but some of this is available for free, as in you don't have to subscribe to the website, and some of it's available on Lexis. Also on Westlaw, but not available under the law school contract, so we're not going to look at that. But we will look at free and Lexis. So first, since we are in Lexis, let's again here, rather than go to Lexis Advanced, or we were in Practice Advisor, let's take a look at public records. Remember, we looked at verdicts. Let's just go up one to public records. This is actually kind of useful because it gives you a sense of what public records are. So you can do some research on people. They actually don't believe we in the law school have access to the people searching. Of course, you can search people on the web. People Google themselves and everybody else on the planet on a daily basis. You get far more information, including social security numbers with some of this, which I think is why it's not available to us. You can do some business searching. But let's take a look at court filings and real property, since we're in a real property mode today. So it might be interesting, again, whether you're representing people, litigating for, against, to take a look at judgments and liens. And again, just to give you a sense of what that is, let's actually do a sample search. So I'm going to do a search of a name we all know. And I'm going to stay on strict search because I want to keep it, because I'm sure I have the spelling right. And why did that? Oh, I didn't limit to New York. That's why it didn't. So let's limit to New York. And now let's search. Oh, wait. Let's limit that one to New York. There we go. So we can see Trump Corporation. You can see where they've been a debtor in some of these, and we can see in some of these where they're a creditor. And you get some information about the filing and the lien and actually the amount. So this is something that you might be doing for various businesses. Again, this is available on Westlaw, but not to us. And as I said, they're back in the old days, there were companies that contracted out to do this. Don't know if they exist anymore because it's available here, or they can do it more sophisticated. I don't know how complete the Lexis and Westlaw databases are for this. But these are public filings. These judgments and liens are filed with the court. They're just collected and made available and searchable, in our example, through Lexis. So that's one example of a type of public record. Let's go back to our public records page and let's take a look at real property. So you can, when you buy or sell real property, you file with the appropriate jurisdiction, basically title. And if you are, for those of you who want to practice in real estate, at least residential, but commercial also, you want to make sure that this, if you're buying, you want to make sure the seller actually owns it and not isn't just claiming it. Because it turns out if someone else owns it, then your client has paid a lot of money, they're going to be very unhappy, and that's not a good thing. And that's just obviously a made-up example. So you search when you're doing real estate transactions, one of the steps is searching the real property records at whatever jurisdiction you are in. So again, as an example, we'll use, since baseball season has started, I know he's sadly retired for you Yankee fans. We will get rid of the company name. And we are still limited in New York, so we'll see what we find. We'll keep it strict search. We'll see what we find for Mr. Jeter. And so here we see, and typically people, famous people have trusts and may not necessarily buy or sell in their own name. Mr. Jeter is an exception. So just to show you what a record looks like. So we have the owner and the property information, deed, so market value, so that's one example, and so you can see here the owner is under a limited liability LLC. And that's more the case for people who are in the news. So here's a this LLC, and I guess the seller was Derek Jeter, and it had to do with property at the United Nations. Interesting. Our other search comes into play. That's just a coincidence that the parcel number of the subdivision was in Trump World Tower condo. Back in 2012, you can see the sale price was $15 million. So again, these are all publicly available records, although a little bit, you have to know how to find them, at least here on Lexis. These real estate records are also available for free on the web, as I mentioned, also on Westlaw, but not available to us. So I am going here to the Nassau County website for, here's the actual website. So look up the basically land records website. And so you could look it up by address. And I did that for a house I was once looking at in Long Beach. I don't know these people, and one thing I like to mention to everybody when I look at these records is that even though these are publicly available records, most people feel that what they buy and sell their homes for is private information. It really isn't. It's out there in the public. So if you are looking at these, just respect people's sense of privacy. So I don't know these people. As I said, I just walk by the house and think it's a pretty house. But I can get information about the market value, recent sales, taxes. If you're thinking of buying a place, you might want to take a look at this. And this is available for free at Nassau County. I imagine other jurisdictions have it as well. Again, I would Google and look at that. Like Nassau County, I would look at the .gov, look at the county website, and see if I could find it there if Googling didn't work. And again, some of these public records are available for free. Again, available for free. I'm not going to necessarily rely on it. This is actually just a website I found Googling on public records. And it just rates the different sites you could go to learn about people search engines. So if you could just Google somebody, or you could sometimes, I don't know about you, but when I get these repeated annoying robo phone calls, I want to look up the number and see if I can figure out who it is. So you can do, it's called a reverse phone number search on some of these sites. This is called People. I know it's spelled funky, but that's how it, so you can, and so these are just the different websites. Actually, they recommend searching Facebook. You guys already knew that. But some other sites, LinkedIn, you probably knew too. This is one of the ones they recommend. It's not People, it's called Zabasearch. Problem with these sites is that you get so far and then they want you to pay money for more information. But sometimes you get far enough to find out, like, when I get annoyed with the robo-phone calls, I can get far enough to find an idea of the name of the company, or at least sometimes in some of the area codes I don't recognize what state it's from. Actually, that's the same problem. I don't know if when you were doing your Google search for the workshop, if you ran into any of those websites that are selling legal forms. That's one of the downsides to doing Google searches for forms, is you pull up a form and it's LegalZoom or somebody, and they could be perfectly fine forms, but they all want you to pay $15 or whatever it is, which may be worth it if you just need a quick and dirty form, but of course, again, you don't know who drafted it and how active it is. So we have the same problem here. You get so far with the People search before they want you to pay whatever the money is to find out more information. So that's People information. Here's a site, there are a couple of them for some of these public records that I just showed you examples of. So you can find some of these liens, real estate. So you see vital records, birth records. That's more people-oriented. And these are these record vendors, so I guess they're still out there. Court records, that's the judgments and liens, in part, that we were just looking at. Okay. Any questions? That's a quick tour through public records. And again, this is not the focus of the course, but useful to know that it's out there. So my goal today was just to say, hey, this stuff is out there. It exists. Good to know about. If you need to know more, at least hopefully you have a start on how to do that. Okay. Have a fabulous spring break. For those of you going somewhere warm, take a swim for those of us who are not going somewhere warm. Come back rested and refreshed, and we'll finish up. Have a great time. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And for those